You know, folks, many of us will look up in the sky, we'll see planes flying all over the place. Some of us have been in those planes. Some of us even work for individuals who are in the field of aviation. You all know that we have a great CAL FIRE aviation program, but do you know the history of that program and how it all started?
From the very first day till now, there's never been a time where we have not continually progressed and advanced. Our aviation program is pretty neat to actually look at year after year.
Well, in this bonus episode, folks, we've got the experts here, and they're going to give us a great history lesson. Get out your pen and paper, get out your tablets, get ready for an amazing lesson on the history of CAL FIRE's aviation program. Let's get cooking. All right, another podcast with the Chief. Chief Tyler, good day to you, sir. How's everything going?
It is a good day. It is a good day.
Good. Thank you. And so today we are going to be speaking with Assistant Deputy Director Jake Sjolund, who is in charge of fire protection operations, in charge of mobile equipment and aviation. Good to see you, sir. How's everything going for you today?
It's great, Monty. Thanks for having me in this morning.
It is so nice to have you. It's really good to get your perspective today with the Chief and I and kind of lay down some of how it is that we've become such a renowned aviation program. I always talk about the fact, and I'm so proud of the fact that our department is renowned worldwide for many of the things that we do, but the aviation program is like really one of the big pieces of how we're so successful in our department. And so, Chief Sjolund, maybe you and Chief Tyler can talk a little bit about the history of our aviation program. Bring us all up to speed to talk about how did we get here? How did we get so dang good with what it is that we do in the world of aviation and mobile?
Well, first, let's say how did we get so good to where we are today? It's about the people who brought this program up to where it is today, from the history of the program to where we are. So it has taken the team as a whole to get us to where we are, to make us who we are today. And really, you know, when we think about the aviation program, we think about, you know, where it was proposed all the way back to 1931. And then we had World War II that came about and really didn't get discussed again until the late 1940s. So somewhere around 1954 to 1957, we used several small air tankers on a call when needed basis. And it wasn't really until 1958 that CAL FIRE itself first contracted for fixed wing air tanker services across the state with various companies that were doing it. By the 60s and into the 70s, the aviation program really started building itself as part of the department and as part of the department's mobile equipment program. And those of you that know me will know that I squirrel a lot, right? And so
it's all good.
Over a period of time, we have seen ourselves where there was a period of time in which mobile equipment and aviation were combined as a single program, and that's where we're talking about the 1960s and 70s. I guess it was probably about 1973, 74 that the Aviation Management Unit was established and became its own program out from under mobile equipment. But even after that, there were periods of times in which, referred to as wings and wheels, was its own program. And then they rolled under fire protection operations. And then it really wasn't until more recently that we split out fire protection operations, the assistant deputy director from operations, and then bringing back mobile equipment in the aviation management unit. Obviously, our predecessors before us saw a vision that thought it would work, and we rolled away from it, and then we rolled back to it. And really, it is about the advancements that are have been brought forward in the aviation program and the advancements to come that really made us realize the workload was there to reestablish a separation of Chief Sjolund's position. It was really around the early 70s in which the department invested in 14 of our piston-powered S2As, not S2Ts. You know, a lot of people refer to our aircraft today as S2Ts, as those turboprops, but before that was the S2A models. And you could really hear those aircraft coming.
Very iconic sound.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, it's almost like going from the Super Huey to the Blackhawk. There's just a very distinctive sound of those going from the A to the T model. And really, you know, Grumman is one of our key aircraft types, but we also used a variety of other types of aircrafts, the PBYs, and I don't know if there were others.
TBM, Grumman F7Fs were in there. The earliest ones that we contracted were actually N3N and Stearman biplanes from the World War II area. Was when that was the first aircraft that we contracted on a call when needed basis. Yeah. And then we actually went into the more exclusive use style contracts. That's where you had the B-17 come in with the other aircraft mentioned. There were several other, but originally there was 5 vendors under contract that provided services with the variety of planes that were mentioned.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Very nice. Well, and that was a lot about our fixed wing, right? So probably 1980, 1981, I think it was probably 81, was we really entered the fleet of using Vietnam-era Huey helicopters, the UH-1F model, not the H model that we recently transitioned out. Well, actually, let me clarify that we're still in Northern California, in Humboldt, Del Norte, and in Lassen Modoc. We're still in those. And then, of course, we're using the UH-1H helicopters still for prescribed fire, helitorch type activities. So that was the intro of, as we already said, the Super Huey helicopter. And it was the backbone and the staple, really, of our rotary wing aircraft program. And then, you know, as we continue to advance the Huey program, we started looking at other opportunities and other avenues as well of what that Huey could do. And we talked about, prescribed fire, helitorches, things like that. But it was an opportunity in which people like Jake and his predecessors really looked at doing things like, what was initially a short haul program, right? And you know, I can't speak. Maybe Jake can a little bit more about the transition from short haul to the Goodrich hoist that we had available to us. But the important thing was, how did we get approval to be able to do that? Well, short haul and the hoist program was originally to evacuate injured firefighters off the fire lines. And then, of course, having that resource available moved us into being able to assist as a rescue helicopter to be able to transition patients from remote areas into an area where it could be transferred into an air ambulance or something of that nature. Any thoughts about that program?
Well, the evolution of for the short haul and the rescue of the firefighters on the fire line, that was pretty critical in terms of being a remote area, rough terrain, trying to get somebody out to the best care, you know, within that golden hour. And so under that short haul program, it served us really well. At the same time, you know, as things evolved in aircraft to get more better performance and capability, and you also have the more effective safety within the hoist system, we did switch over from short haul to hoist. A lot safer for the flight profile for the crews going up and down. And one transition from then till now on the Hawk was we never carried the hoist on the helicopter. It was actually stored in the helitender, and when they needed to perform that operation, they'd have to go land, reconfigure, put the hoist back in the helicopter, then effect the rescue. Whereas today, every time we're in flight, we have the hoist with us on the CAL FIRE Hawk now. So out of all this conversation, honestly, from the very first day till now, there's never been a time where we have not continually progressed and advanced our aviation program. It's pretty neat to actually look at year after year. The aircraft might not have changed for 10, 12 years, but within that model of aircraft, they actually
all the
improve the
different
capabilities.
things. Yeah,
different
yeah.
engines, yeah. So it's really nice to see where we've come to today, and it's really, looking back, there hasn't been any slowdown, and every year there's been an improvement within the program.
That's so amazing. And I think about even, in my career, starting off in the department, in our what was then called public affairs office, and doing articles about different facets of the department. And I specifically remember us doing an article about short haul rescue and how that worked. And it's so cool to hear you two talk about that, because it brings back those memories of just being so amazed at all the different work and the technical aspects, the mechanics of how we do what we do. And it's so cool to hear that stuff, man. So really, really amazing. Anything else about our history, you two, that really we want to drive home for folks about our aviation or mobile equipment programs?
Yeah, so I'm going to put Jake on the spot. His transition into the aviation program was at the Grass Valley Air Attack Base, right?
Correct.
And was that as a captain or as a battalion chief?
As a battalion chief.
As a battalion chief. So when you got to Grass Valley, what type of tactical aircraft were you flying?
I was in an OV-10.
So maybe since that was your real entry into the program, can you tell the audience about our tactical aircraft, the background there?
Absolutely. So that, again, back in the 70s, we were early 70s when we started with our own fleet, contract and service for our own fleet. We ended up initially using like Cessna 182s.
Oh, yeah.
Which for the initial air attack, they were just slow, didn't have, couldn't meet the speed capability, the safety capability at that time. And so all our evolution is always tied to safety.
Right.
Primary, and the second one has always been enhanced capability. The third one is usually just the nuance of the resource. So from there, they went to the O2 model, which was a push-pull aircraft. They called it, had a propeller in the front of the aircraft and one directly behind you. It still had a twin tail like the OV-10, smaller aircraft, piston-powered. So again, it wasn't fast enough. As we transitioned the S2s into the turbo fleet, we still had the O2s, and now they were slower to respond to match that speed of the air tanker. But also they had a higher failure rate with those, just as the same with the air tankers. Right. With the piston engines. There was a high failure rate in those, which was a safety concern. Same thing happened with the O2. There was a safety concern if you lost an engine. So ultimately it evolved into a turboprop of the OV-10. The same purpose for those aircraft, as far as in the military use, it was forward aircraft for forward control. Really the same purpose that we use today is to see where the threat is, which is the fire for us, and then where the friendly forces are, which is our firefighters, and converge those. And so it's the same purpose. What we like about the OV-10, which is phenomenal, is its visibility. It's dexterity that has it. It's safety for the air crew in terms of performance. Should you lose an engine or be in a flight condition. The only real one negative we have is it's not a pressurized aircraft, and so we're limited flying fires over 10,000 feet above ground limit.
Yeah.
And really that's it. Otherwise, it's served us really well, and I don't see things changing anywhere near in the future, because there's not another aircraft that provides the visibility, which is what you truly need.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is interesting when you think about some of the aircraft we're flying, whether it be the S2, the OV-10. The aviation management unit and tactical air operations are constantly looking for airframes that are available to us. And I think the last 3 OV-10s that just came in, we might have acquired from NASA. Flew 2 of them back, brought 1 of them back in another method. I'm not sure how, but that is about strategic planning and planning for the future. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the C-130 program of how we intend to extend the life of the S2. But back to the S2, I hit on this a little bit already. The S2A model went to the T model. That was between about 1996 and 2005 to make them faster and more maneuverable, safer, and depending on where they're flying, elevation, temperature-wise, is how much payload could they carry. So that really improved that fleet of aircraft. And then, before we started this podcast today, Chief Sjolund and I were talking about VLATs. So I'm going to pass it back to you again on a little bit of the history of how did we integrate the very large air tankers.
Very large air tanker was a concept that came out of the private sector, went into the governor's office originally with the concept. Governor Schwarzenegger's administration, who then came back to the department and asked for the agency to look into it and see if it was valuable. That was conducted down at Victorville with the company, with Tanker 10 Company, and then ultimately the development and involvement of that proved to be beneficial, where we actually put it into use. Which had us to increase our capability in terms of a lead plane profile that we didn't have in the department before. So we completed that. There was a trip that went to the first fire was on the Sawtooth Fire, and after that there was a road show that ultimately took the two planes, our ROV-10 and the tanker, up to Washington to fight several fires. I want to say for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks maximum, and then they came back home, and that was the beginning of it.
Yeah.
Wow. To where we are today. And again, that even gets us into, well, those were the very large air tankers, and then we have large air tankers, and that's kind of where our C-130 mission profile will come into that model. But it can't go without saying that in the evolution of the aviation program, we've also had some budget setbacks, right? And budget setbacks were and we've had some budget successes. So I thought maybe we could talk about that in the chronology as well. And you know, there was a point in time in which we moved our S2s around because of some budget reductions. We closed the Fresno Air Attack Base at one time. And then through our cooperative agreement with the San Diego unit and the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, we're able to add, you know, we talk about 10 state helicopters, but there actually is an 11th cooperative agreement helicopter that is staffed with state employees in the San Diego unit. And that's a great program as well. So really when we talk about it, we have 11 staffed helicopters across the state. That's not including all of our local government partners who are buying their own helicopters or transitioning to the S-70 helicopter Black Hawk program. But even before that, they were operating in federal excess UH-1H helicopters that were through federal excess through the Department of Ag and through us to them to be able to operate those helicopters as well. But looking back, we are recovering. It's taken a long time, but we're recovering from some of that. And you know, we look back at 2003, the Cedar Fire, and what came out of the Blue Ribbon Commission report post Cedar Fire. And part of that designated in the Blue Ribbon Commission all the way back in 2003 that, well, I guess it was probably published in 2004, even though it's referred to as the 2003 Blue Ribbon Commission report. And it referenced in there that we needed to replace our rotary wing helicopters and we needed to transition into 24-hour operations. Well, even though it was designated in 2003, you know, we have budget processes to go through.
Right.
And so it took until 2014 for us to finally gain some momentum on the Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations and entered into the ability with the Department of General Services and approval by the administration and the legislature to be able to finally transition our UH-1H helicopters into a new platform. And boy, what a process that was of determining what the new future next generation rotary wing program was going to be.
Yeah. You
know, at one point it could have been a Airbus model. It could have been a Leonardo Augusta Westland model. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we ended up with a Sikorsky S-70I model aircraft that was originally approved, I believe, in 14-15 to be able to purchase one, which opened up the contracting process. At the end of the day, we weren't able to, well, we found opportunities, and the legislature and the administration approved purchasing a total of 11 more for a total of 12 of the S-70Is under contract to be able to replace our UH-1H model helicopter. Right. And Chief Sjolund and company and his program and aviation management unit are currently working through that and have been able to transition, as I think I said earlier, all but the helicopter at Bieber and Neyland was the other one, and they'll be transitioning, I think, here probably in the next year. We found, because we were looking at an opportunity, I keep hitting this, we were at an opportunity to see that we were going to start flying 24-hour operations, that maintenance was going to increase. So that's kind of what slowed the roll a little bit on getting all 10 of our active state bases transitioned into the S-70I. And in fact, last year, the administration approved us buying 4 additional S-70I helicopters. So Helicopter 13, which will be a maintenance reserve platform, should come to McClellan middle of January, correct, I believe. And then we'll be looking forward to the other 3 helicopters making their way in behind that, for a total of 16 S-70I helicopters that we'll have at 10 of our state bases across the state, and have the other aircraft, of course, available for surge and maintenance reserves and other needs that we have as we continue to transition the 5 primary bases to 24-hour operations. And it has always been important to me to reiterate to everyone that we will continue to transition into a 24-hour operation when the crew is comfortable, when the pilot is comfortable, when the battalion chief at the air base is comfortable, right, when the unit chief is comfortable, when the program is comfortable. You know, we're going into this new space of night vision goggles, and we know that some of our partners had already been doing this, but it's important that we do it right. Right, so
and safely.
Yeah. So transitioning Vina and Hemet Ryan. You know, I say Hemet Ryan, it's interesting. I'm just going to make a plug that I just thought about this, that we're sitting in the Hemet Ryan room at Sacramento headquarters
to do this podcast.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
So we were able to purchase those additional S-70Is to really expand our fleet. At the same time, we recognize that we have been working on a C-130 program for a long time. And first, that C-130 program was through an agreement with the Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, ultimately because, in part, that they weren't funded for operation and maintenance, that program ended and was returned, and the state of California was given an opportunity in 2018 to pick up where that program left off, and we continue that today. Well, we recognize through the pandemic and supply chain issues that those aircraft are still delayed. We should have had some of them flying by now. But in recognition of that, here last fire year, this fire year, and next fire year, we were given some additional funding for exclusive use aircraft. Right. We were able to strategically place those helitankers, Type 1 helicopters across the state, a couple of Type 2s as well, just a few fixed-wing aircraft, which have really supported those on the ground and containing fires, keeping fires small. And while, you know, we'll give some plug to Mother Nature for her efforts, or Mother Nature's efforts this year, we still have to give a lot of credit to the women and men on the ground who really, and quite honestly, we're talking about aviation, so those in the air as well, who are keeping these fires small. You know, I'm going to end here, that I talk about all these great operations, but we are, you know, I'll use the old term, we are a total force, right? And so talking about all this expansion and the chronology, well, we couldn't do that without our administrative support staff who are working with DGS, writing contracts, preparing the funding sources for us to be able to do what we do on the ground. So I have to give a plug and an acknowledgement to them as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chief. And I know I've been a part of that, that total force and that work to get that stuff done. And I know, Chief Sjolund, thank you for all of the work that you've done. Folks, I just have to say, when you want to hear about the history of our aviation program, you just heard a whole lot that gives a really good summary and catch up for those of you who haven't been aware of our aviation program and how it all works. That was amazing to hear, Chief. So I want to thank you for that history. It was really, really good. Well, folks, that's it. That is our bonus episode on the history of CAL FIRE's aviation program. We're going to see you on the next episode, hopefully very soon. Until then, we're going to consider this episode cooked. Have a great day.